Welcome back to the Tool Crib. Today we're going to be looking at the Leatherman Rev. Now this was really Leatherman's first attempt at providing a budget multi-tool, something that would compete with these knockoff multi-tools, these cheaper multi-tools. So when this originally came out, and I believe it was 2010 if I'm not mistaken, it was $25 entry price, so it was really cheap. Now interestingly enough, I can no longer find this multi-tool on Leatherman's website. They do not have it in their multi-tools for sale, and they do not show it as of yet listed in their retired multi-tools. I also checked on Amazon to see if I could find any, and there were a couple, but the price has really risen on these. They're up to $60. And here in recent years, the price has gone up over time. Usually you could find them somewhere in about the $35 to $40 range. Sometimes you would get them on sale at your local Home Depot or Lowe's, which carries this particular model quite often. You could get them really cheap. A lot of times I was finding them in the $35, $40 range. But on Amazon today, it was $60. And there's only a couple of different vendors that still have it available. So interestingly enough, it appears that Leatherman has very quietly retired the Leatherman Rev. Well, let's get into the specs of this thing, and we'll show you what made this the budget-friendly model that it was. It no longer is because of the price jump, but when it initially came out, it wasn't a bad deal. Let's get into it. The Rev is actually a pretty pocket-friendly multi-tool. It comes with the integrated pocket clip like you're going to find on the Wingman and the Sidekick as well. It weighed in at 5.85 ounces, about 167 grams. Overall length was a little short of what your standard duty size is, so it's 3 7/8 as opposed to a 4-inch frame. That's going to be about 98 millimeters. Its overall width is 1 5/16 or about 33 millimeters. And the depth on it varies a little bit. On the frame itself, it's about 9/16, and if you're measuring out to the outer portion of the fasteners, it jumps out there about 11/16, so between 14 and 17 millimeters. It's a pretty lightweight multi-tool. It's pretty compact. You'll notice that one side is going to be thinner than the other. This is where it's going to differ somewhat between the Wingman and the Sidekick, is the fact that it has one less outside accessible tool. Well, let's hop around the tools that the Leatherman Rev had to offer. Starting on the outside, there's only one outside accessible tool, and unfortunately with the Rev, it's not a one-handed. Like I have the Wingman here. The Wingman has a one-handed knife blade, as does the Sidekick, but the Rev does not. You have to, it's two-handed operation. Now what I do like about the Rev is that they included a standard blade 420 HC as opposed to what the Wingman has, which is that combo blade. Now the blade length on this is about 2 3/8 of an inch long, or about 60 millimeters. I wish it was just a touch longer, but it's a decent sized blade for what it is. Now if we get around to the interior tools, one key difference between the Rev and the Wingman Sidekick is that the Rev does not have spring-loaded pliers, so it's especially for someone like me who has pretty larger hands, it's a little cumbersome to operate. We'll get into some of the advantages and disadvantages of that here momentarily. It has a pretty decent set of needle nose pliers. They're not going to come down quite as fine as what you're going to find in like the Wave Charge series, but they're pretty decent. Have good regular pliers, have decent wire cutters and hard wire cutters. Now the one benefit to this over the Wingman and the Sidekick is the fact that this uses bypass cutters, where the cutters actually bypass one another, as opposed to the Wingman Sidekick, which I'll pull that out here real quick. Because they're spring loaded, they actually have anvil type cutters where the cutters do not bypass, but more in a pinching motion. That's one advantage that the Rev had over the others. Now this is probably a little bit too big a wire to be trying to cut with this, but we're going to give it a shot. That didn't do too bad, and I'll just pull the Wingman in here real quick to kind of show you what the difference is. You see how the Rev cut that pretty smooth, but the Wingman, because it uses those anvil types, you see how it pinches it down a little bit more, where if we look at the cut on the Rev, it's a little cleaner. So the Rev has a little bit of an advantage in its wire cutting capability. Now, the interior tools are going to be identical to that of the Wingman on the Rev. I like the tool set that's within here. The downside to the tool set that this comes with is the fact that the implements do not lock out. So on one handle you have your combination number 1, number 2 Phillips driver, which is a flattened driver. It's one disadvantage to this series of tools is that it doesn't have a full dimensional Phillips. Now the flathead is really well ground on all these models, so it has a very nice flathead, and they're made pretty thick, so they're decently robust. I just wish that they would have integrated a true lock mechanism on these. Of course, that would have added to their price when they were originally released as well. The spring back mechanism is not bad, and when you're using these, you're going to be closing them up anyway, so it's really not going to completely fold over on you, but it's still kind of weak sometimes, in my opinion. If they would have made that tension a little tighter, I might have liked it a little bit better. Now on the opposite side, the one defining tool for the Wingman and the Rev is going to be the package opener. This is an outstanding tool for cutting through clamshell packaging. It just does a phenomenal job. One of the best tools that Leatherman has come up with in recent years to add to their multi-tools. Works incredibly well. The next tool is going to be a combination tool. It's going to have your small flat driver. They integrate this small file, which it's really not long enough to get a lot of use out of, but it is kind of nice that you do have the ability to have one on there. And then this small ruler. Now the ruler is, in my opinion, is not really a ruler, but more of a depth gauge. It does work pretty decently as a depth gauge if you're measuring stuff that's underneath of an inch, just trying to determine maybe for tread on tires or something like that. So it works decently for that purpose, but overall it's just not a great tool in there. In fact, I kind of would have preferred had they eliminated this and just diamond coated this side. I think it would have been better overall. The last tool is one that's unique to Leatherman that they put in a lot of their tools. This one's a little bit differently designed. This is their combination can opener, bottle opener, and wire stripper. Now the can opener works phenomenally well. The can opener. The bottle cap lifter, because it's not very wide here at the point where it would grab the bottle cap itself, it doesn't make an extremely good bottle cap lifter. It's decent. You just have to catch it just right. It's a little more cumbersome than some of the others that are on the market. The last tool on there is the wire strippers. Now the wire strippers are pretty it's a good tool. It's just not a good tool in this multi-tool, and the reason I say that is because of this. I'm gonna pull out my Surge here real quick and kind of see if I can demonstrate this a little bit. Now the way I use the wire stripping functionality on these types of tools, and you can see how this is profiled a little bit differently, but the way I use that is instead of trying to force it in there, you really can't get anything cut like that. So I always release it, set it against the frame, and then add pressure where I can rotate the tool around the wire, and then I can score through the wire, and you can see that it'll strip it right out. Where in this tool, because of the way the tools are set in there, you'll see on the Surge it's pretty solid across the top here. Same thing with the Wave and Charge series, but in this series of tools you don't have that. So you really don't have anything really solid to push against. So when I press the wire, or press that wire stripper down into the wire, you'll notice that the wire itself kind of bends instead of staying straight and allowing the cutter to really cut into the insulation. It makes it very difficult to use it in this fashion. You can still use it, it's just not nearly as effective as what you're going to find in other multi-tools. You can see I got through about 2/3 of it there. On the back side here, it didn't quite get cut through. So it works decent, it's just not as effective as some of the other style multi-tools from Leatherman. Yeah, in the fashion that I use the wire strippers. Now overall, there's a few things that I like about this tool. The first thing is I love the fact that it has its own integrated pocket clip. I do like the fact that it has anvil, bypass cutters on here as well. They make pretty good wire cutters. And the last thing I like about this tool, apart from the package opener, which I love the package opener, is the fact that they have a full-length knife blade as opposed to the combination blade that you get on the Wingman. Now, what I don't like about this tool is the stamping on the frame itself really feels really cheap. It really does. They use some pretty lightweight stainless steel on here, so it's not the most comfortable in the hand. The second thing that I do not care about for this multi-tool, and this is really only a complaint with the smaller multi-tools for me, is I like, and maybe it's because I'm accustomed to the Wingman, because that's really the one that I kind of gravitate towards in this group of multi-tools, is the fact that it does not have spring-loaded pliers. So it's a little cumbersome for me to operate because of the size of my hands. For others, that might not be an issue. Overall, this is one of the very few multi-tools that I don't care for that much from Leatherman. I really rate this in, it's probably going to fall in about the B- to a B multi-tool for me. There's just too many things on it that I don't care for. And one of the biggest reasons, I think, is because if they would have extended this out, if they would have made it the same profile size as the Wingman and give us one more additional tool on here, even though it wasn't spring-loaded pliers, I might have liked it a little bit more had they given us a pair of scissors or a saw or a full-length file or even a serrated blade, something of that nature. Overall, it just doesn't cut it for me. It's one of the very few that I don't care for that much. Now, it's a great starter multi-tool, but unfortunately the price has really risen out of the realm of starter multi-tools for me, and I think there's better options for for gifting someone their first starter multi-tool, or if you were just purchasing your very first starter multi-tool. I think there's options that are more cost effective and still give you good functionality. Now, the one thing that they're not going to give you is the one tool that is the best in this particular multi-tool, and that is this package opener. That is really a fantastic tool to have in this multi-tool. I wish it was in more Leatherman products. Well, this has been my review of the Leatherman Rev. Initially, when it came out at $25, it was a good deal. It really was. Unfortunately, as prices have risen over time, I think it has fallen out of that realm of being a good deal. Now, if you can find it on sale still, which, as I mentioned before, it's no longer on Leatherman's website and very hard to find on Amazon. If you can find one at a really good price, then I would say yes, pick it up. If you can't, and you're in that $50 and $60 range, I would say bypass this multi-tool. There's better options out there. My name's Ben. You've been watching my review of the Leatherman Rev here on the Texas Tool Crib. Hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, please hit the thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.